Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by regulatorwatch.com. While it was breaking news yesterday, but like all things government, it took until today to pass. What was it? Well, Bill H.R. 2339, the Reversing the Youth Tobacco Epidemic Act. Sponsored by Democratic Representatives Frank Pallone of New Jersey and Donna Shalala of Florida, the bill was introduced a year ago, and now the House of Representatives has passed the bill, which is a ban on flavored vaping products in all 50 states. Joining us today to talk about the ban and the potential impact on the industry and whether or not President Trump would veto the bill is John Glauser, CEO of Demand Vape, executive board member of the Vapor Technology Association, and anchor supporter of our U.S. coverage on RegWatch. John, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brent.
I'm going to get you to play both reporter and analyst for us today. So first off, can you tell us a little bit about what's in this bill and why do you think it passed?
Yeah, I could absolutely tell you what's in the bill. So just a quick overview. This would actually amends the FD and C, which the Tobacco Control Act is a part of, to basically ban all characterizing flavors in tobacco products, including menthol. It would prohibit online sales completely in all ENDS products. It would increase the user fees that the FDA collects from manufacturers when they sell the products. It would direct FDA to regulate products containing synthetic nicotine, which I think got passed over quite a bit. It would establish a grant program to develop strategies for smoking cessation in medically underserved communities. It increased civil penalties for violations for the restricted sales of tobacco products. And it would also require government accountability office to study e-cigarettes in a lot of different ways. And what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry, Brent.
Why did it pass?
I think this is the congressional Democrats kind of playing politics with the administration. Obviously, a lot of things have happened to bring us to this point, but there was quite a push. Nancy Pelosi herself came out to speak on this bill, which, if that's not an indication to how politically charged this issue is, I don't know what else is.
Yeah, and we're going to talk in a bit here with regard to the letter that came out of the White House yesterday and some astonishing positioning from President Trump. But I want to stick here for a while on the Democrats because they've been chasing this ban like a dog with a bone now for some years.
Yeah, and to be fair to the Democrats, there's different levels of Democrats and what their appetite is for this specific type of legislation. Frank Pallone, there's no doubt, he's the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. But he's a zealot. He's had it out for our industry for a very, very long time. This has been on his agenda for what feels like years now. And this was kind of his baby, and as time progressed, he's been trying to push this through. But obviously with the Uvalde scare that happened and, vaping was kind of up front in the media for such a long time, this gave them the opportunity to get this pushed to a vote.
I hear you, John. I'm just rewiring some gear there while you were talking. So usual, typical last minute broadcasting here on RegWatch. So I wanted to make sure that we had our computer going. So let's talk frankly here. If this were to pass the Senate, we'll deal with whether or not that's a likelihood or not in a minute. But if it were to pass the Senate, what would be the impact on vaping in the U.S.?
Oh my God, it would be devastated. Just to be clear, what this legislation does is it legislatively bans all characterizing flavors in tobacco products, including menthol. So even if you were a manufacturer and you filed a PMTA, which we all know is such a high bar, and it was deemed that your flavored products were appropriate for the protection of the public health, this legislation would essentially make it illegal to sell those products. It would pinhole FDA into only allowing tobacco products on the market.
Yeah, and is there any real hope? What's the argument that this would actually reverse the epidemic? Whenever I hear government say that they can reverse a social phenomenon, I mean, unless they're willing to put bullets in people's heads, it's not likely.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people that were opposed to this bill kind of, outlined that issue very well. I think there's an appetite, and I think everyone's on the same page on addressing the youth use in this country. And, this misses the mark big time. This is definitely agenda-driven. This is, in my opinion, it gives the people that push this type of legislation a lot of political clout. Like, they're really doing something. They're working very hard. We have this big issue in front of us, and it's whatever sounds best to the public. That's what we're going to put out there. We're going to grandstand and make it seem like we're doing everything we can. And if you oppose this, you're against helping kids. But at the end of the day, they're the ones doing the most damage, and that's really what the issue is in our political system right now.
Yeah, no, I do agree. Let's just pop over here for a second to the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, and you were right, he is the chair of that committee. And I guess commerce does make some sense. Energy sure doesn't, with regard to is this the right home for this bill? But Malone praises House passage of H.R. 2339, the Protecting American Lungs and Reversing the Youth Tobacco Epidemic Act. So a different name here for it. Protecting American lungs. I mean, that's just, to me, I don't know, we've got all this stuff going on in Canada right now where our country's burning down thanks to militant anarchists and communists, which, by the way, Americans are the ones that have been funding. Thank you very much, you and your foundations. So, when I see something like this coming out of your government, the Protecting American Lungs is it's bravado to me that's beyond belief. Unfortunately, so this is a quote from Malone. Unfortunately, these products have proliferated in use in recent years as manufacturers peddle enticing flavors like bubblegum, cotton candy, and mango to our children with glossy advertisements. These campaigns have been so successful that Big Tobacco has rapidly reversed years of progress to bring down teen smoking rates. In just 1 year alone, between 2017 and 2018, e-cigarette use by high school students increased by alarming 78%.
Yeah, it's that kind of language is shocking. They use these statistics against us, and they obviously have an agenda and they're trying to push it through. And back to protecting American lungs. Adults do not need the government to protect our lungs for us. We are more than capable of making our own choices. And I think the reason that wording was put in there was on the menthol side of things, especially in the combustible tobacco. There really was quite a divide, even amongst some of the Democrats on the menthol, which really helped our industry out a lot because it got us a lot of the needed pushback that we needed on this legislation. They're really trying. They're prohibitionists. They want to control how people make their choices, and not even how they make their choices, but they want to take those choices away from the public. And they think it's their responsibility, their duty. And at the end of the day, it's almost sickening to think about that. We have a political system where our government wants to be able to dictate what we can and cannot do with legal products.
Yeah, and that's obviously, I think, the big concern here is that if you're not looking to protect this product, what products are you willing to protect?
And it was actually very refreshing to see when they were debating this bill. There's a couple Republicans that stood up and said, even on the tax side of it, because this would be a huge tax increase. We're talking about taxing this product basically out of existence. And a couple of them stood and said, I cannot stand here and support this bill because what we're essentially doing is we're telling people who want to quit smoking that they have to pay a premium to do that. And it's one of the first times I've heard that type of language on the House floor, and it was refreshing to see. And it seems like the narrative that we've been pushing and weaving, and at the end of the day, what really is truth is starting to kind of infiltrate and penetrate a lot of these politicians' ears, and I was so happy to see that.
So I didn't get a chance to see any of the debate on the floor. Who would you say on the Republican side deserves the most kudos from the vaping industry?
Well, everyone had kind of their plus and minuses, right? Each one of these congressional representatives represent their districts. So you have people that were obviously, a little bit more apt to protect the tobacco side of things. And then you had other people that were very practical about it. Really on the Republican side, I would say across the board. And, I also want to make sure that as an industry, the Democrats that voted against this, we need to show them our appreciation. We need to communicate with those people, and even the ones that voted for this. We still need to get in there and educate them. There are obviously going to be some like Frank Pallone that I don't think, no matter how much energy, effort we put into it, will ever change their mind. But it's a huge issue we have. I do not think this is a partisan issue. I think right now it's a partisan issue. But at the end of the day, it's our job not only to convey to the public the potential benefits and harm reduction aspects of our product, but we need to educate every politician, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on. And I think that gets lost in translation sometimes.
Yes, I do agree with you on that. Let's listen to, you mentioned Pallone again. Let's listen to some of his comments after the bill passed. And I've got this here courtesy of Michelle Mitten's Twitter feed. Yay, Michelle. Go, Michelle. So let's just make sure this plays okay. It's about a minute. Well, it should be playing.
Start to look. Let me just say this. I don't want you to get the impression that the only thing we're worried about here is youth tobacco. I mean, adults too get, start to believe that these vaping products are cessation devices when I'm telling you they're not. They're just as addictive, if not more. You don't have to be young to be stupid. A lot of people who are older get hooked and hoodwinked into this stuff as well. We're trying to deal with anybody who's young or who thinks that somehow these things are actually not what they are. And that's what the tobacco companies do. Does it only deal with kids? No, it affects adults. I'm not telling you that, but I think it affects adults in a positive way because these flavors are hoodwinked with adults too who don't realize what they're getting into. I'm not talking about you. I mean, you know what you got into with the menthol. But a lot of people don't. They think it's not nicotine.
So hoodwinked there, Mr. Glauser. Are you hoodwinking adults?
I sincerely hope not. I mean, if adults are hoodwinked by a product that clearly states it contains nicotine on it and nicotine is an addictive chemical, I would honestly say that I would bear no responsibility in that transaction because they have their own problems. And, these are the things that, Congressman Pallone uses to try to push his agenda, that adults, aren't capable of making their own choices, or they're stupid, just like kids. What a crazy statement to make. I mean, if I were one of his constituents, I would be calling him right now, very upset that he just called me stupid, because at the end of the day, he's saying that there's a lot of people out there that do not have the brain capability or the thought process to be able to make decisions for themselves or understand what they're putting into their body.
Yeah, I mean, that's the progressive outlook, though, isn't it?
Yeah, no argument there. I mean, I've been always very clear on where I stand on this. And, there are some true progressives out there that want a better humanity. But on the most part, the way that our, in the United States specifically, the whole progressive movement has kind of gone to this, like, we need to tell you what to do. You need to adhere with it, or we're just going to get rid of you altogether and your voice doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, they practice totalitarian science, then they use that science to then create totalitarian law, and then now they've passed totalitarian law. So do you think the Senate is going to pick this ball up, and run it across the 100-yard line?
I mean, no, my opinion, I think absolutely not. I don't think there's little to no chance in the Senate that this will ever even see a vote, let alone get passed. Anything's possible. I don't want to guarantee anything, but, the administration obviously came out with some very strong language opposing this bill. And, Mitch McConnell in the Senate is very good at making sure that, they're aligned when it comes to these types of like political stunts, as if you want to put it that way, that the congressional Democrats pull to try to get their agendas pushed through.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a quick look at that, John. This is the statement, the Executive Office of the President, Office of Management and Budget, which is great when you're getting an OMB letter the day before the vote. So this came out yesterday. So yesterday they voted to vote today. So that was fine because at least it gave the president and the OMB a chance to get out first with a pretty decent letter. I mean, I think there's just so much in here. Let me just read some of it here just to make sure that we get it out. The administration opposes H.R. 2339. The administration is encouraged by legislative efforts to protect American youth from the harms of addiction and unsafe tobacco products. And it also acknowledges that H.R. 2339 exempts premium cigars, which have comparatively lower youth usage rates from certain regulatory burdens. So first, let's just stop there. The cigars. So they felt it very important to call that out right away, that the cigars were being left alone.
Yeah, and and to me that's a good thing. I mean, they should leave all of this stuff alone. But when you're picking and choosing based on, what demographic or what race uses these types of products or how likely kids are to use them, that's just not an equitable situation for anyone, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just on that, before we go back then to the letter from the OMB, just to address what you mentioned there with regard to race, here's an article from The Hill today, just came out a short time ago. Youth tobacco use legislation would have unintended life or death consequences for Black tobacco users. This week marks a critical, life-changing moment for the Black community, specifically for Black tobacco users. The Reversing the Youth Tobacco Epidemic Act is set for a vote this week in the House of Representatives, so I guess this was yesterday. And while this bill seemingly makes a lot of sense in curbing youth tobacco use, there are some glaring, unintended, dire consequences for communities of color with this legislation. Let me first point out here before I continue to read this, and this is going to be a little bit of a kudos on RegWatch's back. About 3 years ago, we started pushing, going, why isn't this a social justice issue? This needs to be made into a social justice issue. It, disproportionately affects poor people, disproportionately affects Black people, and so forth. And now we've had Helen Redmond from Filter when she was on, fully talking about it, and others have too. But I have to tell you, most of the time, and certainly in the past when we were all taped episodes, the portions about social justice were never really solid enough for me to use them. It just was not something. Alex Clark sees it as a social justice issue too as well. So does Julie Wasner from CASA. But, it's never been the thing that the vaping industry has clombed onto as a strong push. So this is encouraging to see that at least that this is out so strongly. Do you have a thought on that, John?
Yeah, I mean, I have an opinion on it, obviously, and I believe in justice. I don't know if I necessarily believe in social justice. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge people's differences, but at the end of the day, we're all humans, and I think we all deserve to be respected and protected all equally. It doesn't matter what our skin color is, what race we are, where we were born. So that's just my outlook on it.
I'm with you 100% on that, boss. But still, though, if you're going to fight their battle, that was my point, was that, well, we should be making this a social justice issue, even though I don't believe in social justice. But, that's the hypocrisy. What is...
Yeah. And Brent, I agree with you, from a political perspective, right? Regardless of my own personal opinion, if 90% of the African-American or Black community uses menthol products, from my perspective, we should protect the rights of anyone to use these products, right? But,
yeah.
They're obviously being unfairly kind of, hit with taking these products off the market if that's what they prefer. And, absolutely, we should advocate for them to have the ability to buy the products that they want.
Yeah, I mean, it's finding whatever, for the lack of a better term, democratic sweet spot or, victim community that they prefer. If you can somehow get that, the impacts of a ban on your side for that, then, you want to try to leverage that. And that's, exactly what this story is talking about, considering the fact that 90% of Black smokers use menthol products. Menthol tobacco users would live in fear of new stop and frisk opportunities under this legislation because menthol would now be considered an illegal flavor. A ban that targets menthol products but ignores other premium tobacco products unduly burdens the black community. This asymmetrical ban feels more like a targeted attack than a value-neutral healthcare policy decision. In effect, white adult smokers would see little difference in their lives after this ban, while black smokers could face even more sweeping harassment from law enforcement if the hint of menthol smoke can justify a stop. Now, I mean, I certainly, that is disgusting. There is no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, both sides of it. I fundamentally disagree with the whole premise there, right? But if you really like break this down to a nuanced issue, and it's absolutely insane. Like, think about it from this perspective. We have a society that's willing to advocate for a combustible product that kills people based on flavor. And that's, a big part of the reason that there was so much opposition to this bill. But when you look at vapor products that are so much less harmful than that product that we're just that we're comparing it to, there's people that will go out, politicians that will stand out on a ledge and fight tooth and nail to preserve that product. But when it comes to our product and flavors that are, arguably a public health, like a godsend, that it's crickets. No one's willing to stand up and do the right thing. So if that doesn't prove how politically charged and how politics works, I don't know what else would.
Yeah, I do agree. And standing up, we do have a little bit of that from, again, we'll go back to the OMB here and the letter from the president's office. So the administration cannot support H.R. 2339's counterproductive efforts to restrict access to products that may provide a less harmful alternative to millions of adults who smoke combustible cigarettes. Full stop, mic drop. What do you think?
Yeah, that literally made my year to see the administration put out wording like that. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime, to be honest with you. And that's why I'm such a big supporter of this administration. They kind of don't go by the status quo. If they believe in something, they're willing to go out on that ledge and double down on it. Not only were they standing up for menthol and combustible tobacco, but they straight out came out and say this is a potential harm reduction product, and you guys are missing the mark on this in a very, very public way. It could be a turning point, and I don't think that this is by any means like an end game here. The administration has saved our industry. We have a long way to go, but at least we have a starting point that we could leverage to move forward with the acknowledgement that these are harm reduction products.
Yeah, I mean, the administration is saying they're a less harmful alternative for millions of adults who smoke combustible cigarettes. That is astonishing. And the language wasn't totally qualified. It says may provide a less harmful alternative, but nothing stronger than that. Queasiness too much. May provide. That's good. It may provide. This includes the bill's prohibition of menthol e-liquids, which available evidence indicates are used relatively rarely by youth. It also includes the bill's approach to remote retail sales. At this time, problems surrounding such sales should be addressed through the application of age verification technologies rather than, as this bill would do, prohibiting such sales entirely. It's great news, good stand on online sales. The administration is also concerned about the constitutionality of a provision in the bill that prohibits certain advertising practices with respect to electronic nicotine delivery system, ENDS products. The bill would prohibit marketing and advertising that, quote, appeals to an individual under 21 years of age, close quote. This standard may not satisfy the stringent vagueness test applied to regulations of speech under the Constitution's Due Process Clause. So a couple of things there that I really like is the fact here again. So earlier, safer alternative or less harmful alternative. And then now we have the use of the actual term electronic nicotine delivery system, ENDS products, which, by the way, is the exact terminology that's a CDC used up until the moment that they realized that they could pin people dying on e-cigarettes when it was, THC. So, I mean, an ends product is clearly electronic nicotine delivery system, and a precise term for it like that would prevent the entire, well, the criminal activity by the CDC, right? That's why we have names like that. So it was really important to see that from in this OMB letter. What do you think about that, John?
I mean, obviously, I appreciate their stance on both sides of it. I know in our industry, there's always this constant struggle about online sales, and would it benefit the vape shops, or should they be accessible? But I think the administration hit the nail on the head. I mean, there are people that live in these remote destinations that count on online sales to get these products, and it just also, I think, outlines a much more rational and reasonable approach to regulating anything, right? So instead of going from 0 to 100 because we need to solve the problem, let's implement, rational steps and see how they work. And that's how, not only how regulations should work, but that's how science should work too, right? We shouldn't just come to conclusions and say things are bad without having anything to back it up. So I was so happy to see that letter come out, regardless of the reason they put it out. And, it's also another way for the administration to basically say to the Republican caucus and the Republicans in the Senate, like, stand down on this. This is where we stand. Basically, stay in your place. We're not pushing this through.
Yeah, that is definitely what does come out of this letter. We're almost done it. The administration is committed to protecting the nation's youth from the harms of tobacco and has already taken several steps to do so. This includes signing legislation to raise the minimum age of sale for tobacco products to 21. In January 2020, moreover, the administration issued guidance to prioritize enforcement against the unauthorized marketing of certain ends products to youth. And the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, is conducting regular surveillance of and, when appropriate, taking enforcement measures against websites, social media, and other publications that advertise regulated tobacco products. And finally, the bill takes the wrong approach to tobacco regulation. Rather than continuing to focus on the FDA's Center for Tobacco Products, Congress should implement President Trump's budget proposal to create a new, more directly accountable agency within the Department of Health and Human Services to focus on tobacco regulation. This new agency would be led by a Senate-confirmed director and would have greater capacity to respond to the growing complexity of tobacco products and respond effectively to tobacco-related public health concerns. If presented to the president in its current form, the president's senior advisors would recommend that he veto the bill. That
very, very strong language. And again, I allude back to the much more rational approach, right? Let's, if there's an issue here, and I think everyone's on the same page, industry included, that, we need to keep these products out of the hands of youth. And, there's no argument there. And then the only question is, how do we address that? And that, to me, is a much more rational and regulatory better way to address these issues, rather than let's just blanket take everyone's rights away for, the sake of the youth and the stupid adults, as Frank Pallone puts it.
Right. What about this proposed new agency? I mean, that's intriguing. Are we talking about, removing the entire, regulation of nicotine out of the FDA's hands? Is that really what's happening here in terms of what's being suggested?
Yeah, that's what that's what President Trump is pushing for, and the administration's pushing for. They want, obviously FDA has a lot of responsibilities, and they a huge part of the upcoming election, one of the administration's goals is to lower drug prices and concentrate on healthcare. So I think one of the frustrations, and I think it's a justifiable frustration, is that you have FDA putting so much time, energy, and resources on these tobacco issues when they should be concentrating on much more important things. So what they're proposing is to take it out of FDA's hands and, have a Center for Tobacco Products still under, the umbrella of Health and Human Services, but its own separate entity that has, a Senate confirmed head or, commissioner, let's say, that is much more accountable and can probably work much more efficiently to address these rapidly moving problems that that we face instead of these blanket legislative bans.
So as we, kind of caught from the phone call there, or the conference call, listen in, which was like, Jesus, man, I wish I never got involved in this vaping topic from the president, right? So clearly he's seen the milieu out there and realized it's a rat's nest with these regulators.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it, even looking at it from even someone who has very little knowledge of our industry, if you take a look at this regulatory framework that they're trying to put our products through, it doesn't take a genius to figure out, like, it's just not, this isn't meant for this. Like, this is not an efficient or a practical way to allow a new technology that could potentially save, millions or even billions of lives over time to come to market. So, I support any effort that allows these products to be more readily available to adult users who want to transition from combustible cigarettes, or me personally, any adult user that wants to enjoy them. As an adult, I think they should have the choice to want to use any product they see fit and make that choice for themselves.
Yeah, I agree that choice is critical. And I mean, it's so this concept that everybody needs protecting from themselves is very concerning.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I would say it's anti-American in a way. And one of the other things I loved about the letter was the fact that they, talked about the constitutionality of what was being proposed, like this vague regulatory or vague legislative language about if it appeals to people under the age of 21. That's literally a blanket statement that gives them authority to act in any way that they see fit. It's very akin to appropriate for the protection of the public health, right? There is no standard there. It's basically we make any decision we want for whatever reason we want, and we'll let you know what that decision is when we come to it.
Right. So, hey, John, I was just checking on our Facebook feed here, and for some reason, Facebook just totally punked out on us today. So it stopped the stream around 26 minutes in. So it says that the live video has ended. So hopefully people will get this on YouTube. I will re-upload this once it's all done and cleaned up from the YouTube feed, and then I'll get it up onto Facebook in its entirety. So for those of you who are not listening right now on Facebook, you will be seeing this shortly. All right, so John, being mindful of our time here, I wanted to ask you about the PMTA process, because that's looming in May.
Sure.
Yeah, that's coming right up, and I've not heard anything yet, anything that sounds hopeful. Mostly I've heard not a lot because nobody's talking.
It's a very complicated issue. There's some, obviously there in passing the Tobacco Control Act, there's certain legal constraints that everyone has to operate in, including FDA, including the administration, that would take an act of Congress to change. And then there's this whole political kind of dynamic to it, where there is a little bit of leeway, but it's very complicated. It's not an easy question to answer. Obviously, I'm for allowing more people to participate in this industry through the regulatory process. That's where I stand, and that's what everyone's advocating for. But given kind of the nuance and the dynamic of the legality and the complexity of the regulatory framework that we're looking at, it's not something that is very easy to communicate or message on.
Yeah, I mean, can you share a little bit about what VTA is doing to help, push that along?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have we've been regularly meeting with representatives and senators. Ron Johnson has been especially helpful. He's, advocating on behalf of the small businesses, essentially under the assumption that this is not a fair process for small businesses specifically, and something needs to be done. The question is, what can be done given that legal framework that we're talking about? And I think the administration specifically, and, we obviously are feeding information and making sure that the small business voice is heard in the administration. I think has taken some very strong language, even in that letter, for example, taking CTP out of FDA. VTA doesn't have a stance on whether they're pro or against that because there's a lot of unintended consequences that could potentially happen from that. But I think that, that's indicative of the effort that we've been putting forth to try to accommodate some of these, the small business aspect or even the industry aspect of this regulatory process. It's obvious that there's a problem here that needs to be addressed. The only question is, how do we address it effectively and legally?
So how big of an election issue do you think vapors could make this coming up here in 2020?
I personally think, and I know people disagree with me, but I think this is a huge election issue. I mean, if nothing else, today should show the public and vapors in general kind of how important this election is for us, right? Any candidate on the left right now, for the most part, I don't think is, whether they're for a all-out vapor ban or, the PMTA process, or I don't care where they stand, they're definitely not gonna come out and advocate for these types of products where, this administration, I think, has proven that they're at least willing to budge on it, that they acknowledge that, we do have a harm reduction technology here and that, it needs to be treated as such. So, I think that the administration knows that the vapor vote and vapors in general are very important to his campaign, and they're a big part of his base. I think that's very true. So I think, vapors can make this a huge election issue.
Well, and I guess that's the thing. Now, how do you do it? But, it's pretty helpful when the president has the OMB issuing letters like they did yesterday. That's helpful because it does, put it squarely down here as an election issue.
Yeah. And, I think that even the way that this whole situation played out on this congressional bill, for example, when you have the Speaker of the House coming down to swing votes because they're worried about whether or not they're going to have enough votes in their own party to pass this through, the democratically controlled House, that's a very political move. And I think that, the arena's kind of set that this is going to turn into a war of some sort, right? You have one side that's doubling down on, we need to address this, we need to save the kids, we need to ban all the flavors. And even within that own party, there's a little bit of, indecision there. In my opinion, more so because of the menthol combustible tobacco part. But even so, let's take a win where we can get it. And on the other side, you have someone who's clearly willing to come out and, openly say that, these products, perhaps we need to rethink how we're looking at this. To what extent? No one has that answer yet, but we need, that's our responsibility as an industry to make sure we push it to that level.
Well, anytime you can get at a national level in Washington, just even the potential where somebody says, I'm for a flavor ban for vaping products, and you can get more than one other politician to put in, you go, you racist. You're a racist for wanting a flavor ban. Racist, right? So, maybe they didn't actually say that, but that's what is implied by the...
Well, in all fairness, Brent, that used to be a lot more difficult. Now it seems like that you're a racist comes out no matter what situation you're in.
Oh, yeah. Don't make me play my race card. Okay, John. So look, let's mindful of time here on a Friday. So I want to do a couple of, fast things here. What did you think of the glance retraction?
Oh my God. That was probably the second most happiest I've been because, I personally cannot stand not only his research, but the way that he just smugly kind of goes about doing these despicable things with no one paying attention to it, no one noticing it. So just the fact that standing glance was put into like a media cycle and in a negative light, justifiably so, just made my week, to be honest.
Yeah, kind of a good last 7-10 days here that we've had. We had Dr. Brad Roe Do on earlier this week, and of course he led the entire questioning of, and he's been doing it for years, of Professor Glance's work that led to the Journal of the American Heart Association to retract the paper. And so when he was on, we talked about a bunch of things. Two issues that I wanted to quickly throw at you. One is that I've been asking, why is it that these public health officials who seem for years, decades, to be so concerned about the health of smokers, be so tuned out with regard to the fact that vaping saves lives? So the industry and vapors say, and advocates say, vaping saves lives, and public health turns back and says, who cares? Well, why is that? Like, why is that? That, and when the vaping-related lung illness hit in August of 2019, and the CDC came out with that title, it immediately sounded like smoking-related deaths. Smoking-related deaths. I go, Jesus, if they're lying about vaping-related lung illness, vaping-related deaths, right? Well, then why aren't they lying about smoking-related deaths? And then that started us going down the rabbit hole. Then, of course, Dr. Roe Do has been writing about this for years, and others too as well. And it seems that these numbers that the CDC has been using and the rest of public health that have been saying, forecasting the numbers of people that are going to die each year as regard to smoking, they pretty much stayed the same and static for 20, 30 years. So as smoking goes down, the forecast stays up. And yeah, sure, more population, this and that. But that's not it. The fact is that they've been lying about these numbers forever. Now, what Dr. Roe Do said, and I didn't have time to put the clip together, I'll try to do that for the next episode. Dr. Roe Do surprisingly said that the CDC, those are not the CDC's numbers, it's the American Cancer Society's numbers. What do you think of that?
Yeah, and I mean, these NGOs are a huge issue in American, not healthcare and public health, all across the board. They have a vested interest in making sure that they have something to fight against. And, Dr. Roe Do, I love Dr. Roe Do. He's one of the most honest people I've ever talked to in my life. And because of his position, he can't, kind of say these things. And I don't even know if that's his opinion per se, but, I can say these things. And, at the end of the day, these NGOs, they need a reason to exist. They need someone to fight against. That's how they bring in their money, right? And when you could go out and make up numbers and put a ton of money from that comes either from billionaires or from all across the United States into funding all these studies that are being done on the exact topic that you're fighting against, it's very easy to control that narrative. But back to your original question, I think that there's two issues with kind of the anti-tobacco movement. I do think that there are legitimate scientists out there, or researchers, I should say, that truly do care about public health. I think that, as is natural, when you're fighting something for so long, that you kind of get stuck in the idea of, everything that, you come to this like conclusion that it has to be bad because breathing fresh air is good. Like, I think a lot of them are not intentionally kind of getting to these end results that aren't equitable or scientifically, I guess, verifiable. But then you have like your standing glances and like the small group of people that, have made quite a bit of money from these like NIH grants, for example, and from these initiatives that are clearly where you have an end result and give me the science to get me to the end result. And to me, that's the most despicable thing, because that's worse than even tobacco companies, in my opinion. Because what I think someone like Standing Glance is doing is they're basically taking money to come to conclusions that kill people. Well, they think you're helping them. And I could honestly say no one in the vapor industry does that. And that is, the most despicable thing I think anyone could do, period.
That is definitely strong words. I think we're going to leave it at despicable, John. Do you have anything to add outside of that?
No, and I mean, I think it's a problem that needs to be fixed. I think we need to take a look at how our public health institutions get funded, where the money comes from. And, I think that science is important, and I think that fair science is the most important thing. And the irony in this whole situation is researchers like Dr. Roe Do, who are always accused of being, funded by tobacco, and, they're not reliable, you can't trust what they say, are really at the end of the day the most honest, trustworthy people. They have integrity, and they come to the conclusions, good or bad, and they publish them. And then the people that we're supposed to trust, and like I said, I don't want to put a blanket term out there, because I think there's some very, very honorable researchers who are just kind of in this mentality of these types of products must be bad, right? It's just more of an ideology than anything intentional. But when you get to the level of your Stanton glances, you're that despicable level, like I said, it's terrible, and that in itself is a public health travesty.
I do agree, and I mean, there's no separation from government influence, on research. When all the millions of dollars, it starts from the premise that we're going to have a smoke-free future in a certain number of years or decades. And so if that's the government strategy coming out of FDA and CDC, so if that's the strategy, all the research is going to be spent on moving that forward. Not, and if the problem is, of course, is that vaping products are immediately just called tobacco. And because of that definition, then allows for the rest of the stuff to roll with it, right? So you can just treat it as tobacco, you can research it as tobacco, you can defame it as tobacco, you can do all this same stuff when it's not actually tobacco, right? So, but go ahead.
Oh, and just to put this into perspective, you have a researcher like Dr. Farsalinos, who has done amazing work, unbiased, great science. And no one knows who this guy is. He's not getting millions of dollars in grants to keep conducting this. He's got a great track record of beautifully published studies that he's been putting out for years on vaping. He literally leads the field of research scientists when it comes to this vaping topic. And no one could say that he doesn't have integrity and his science isn't good. And then you have someone like Stanton Glantz who, gets money just like that. And, that alone should tell you that there's a problem.
I do agree. And now we're talking about money and funding, and you're right. Dr. Roe Do gets smacked all the time for the fact that there is likely some industry money around in the university, of course. He's in Kentucky, so that makes some sense. But on that note, of course, is that RegWatch is supported by industry and vapors and viewers and so forth. And so please, if you get a chance, go to support.regulatorwatch.com. That's support.regulatorwatch.com. And, maybe dig into your wallet and find a few dollars and toss them our way. You'll be in very good company. And we do need the help. We haven't really been pushing this year. Of course, I've not been in the best of actual physical shape. Some of you might know had some ergonomic issues and that kind of stuff. But I'm on the mend now, which is fine in the last couple of weeks. Well, last week, really. And then, of course, we bought like 25 grand in new gear here. That's to try to make the show better, which is obviously what we're trying to do all the time. And of course, you will be in great company, and our anchor supporter and our U.S. coverage is Demand Vape. And without John Glauser and the people at Demand and Juno, we would not be here. And it's the same in Canada. It's Stealth, Divine, and Flavor Art, and Flavor Crafters. Gosh, my original juice. Thank you, John Marshall, Stinky Canucks, and the rest of you guys. Please do, if you get a chance, go to sport.regulatorwatch.com and take a look around and see if you can give us a hand. One-time donation or monthly would be appreciated. John, I'm going to toss the last bit to you. What is your hope for the next 8 months?
My hope is that every single vapor that uses these products to better their lives and stay away from cigarettes, or just enjoys them, becomes active and calls their representatives at the state level and the federal level. We got a long fight on our hands, and I think we've given what we've been up against, I think that we've been very, very successful. But I don't want anyone to think that this is anywhere near over. So that truly really is my hope, because I believe in these products, and I think that we need to fundamentally change how our policymakers and our regulators look at these products. And I think the only way that's going to happen is through public pressure. And it's I can't overstate how fundamentally important that really is.
John, that's a great way to end the show. But actually, I realized I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the coronavirus and its impact on hardware and so forth in China. What do we know about that? That's a whole other ballgame.
Oh man, so it's obviously having a huge impact, on us as a distributor, on the Chinese manufacturers, on how they do business. The supply chain is just, I don't want to say devastated because every company is in a different situation in China. But the issue is that even though they're back to work, you still need raw materials and supplies to put products together. And there's not just a shortage of materials and supplies, but they can only get materials and supplies for certain products. So it's not like they could just start manufacturing whatever they want. So I highly recommend that we have to be patient. We have to this is my best recommendation to vape shops and people that have a business in this arena right now, because who knows what's going to happen in the United States as well. And my opinion is coronavirus is what it is, right? I don't think anyone should panic. It's not going to kill millions of people, or it's not that big of a deal. But there's going to be an effect, I think, in the United States as well. But it could be a little while until people could just get what they want. So at the vape shop level, I think it's super important to communicate to your customers that, if you rely on vaping to stay off cigarettes, or you rely on these products, we will have stock. It might not be exactly what you want, but we want to work with you to make sure that not only do you have a satisfying experience, but if you need to substitute one thing for the other, we're here to educate you on what to go to, what we recommend. And, as far as time frame goes, anyone's guess is best. There's too many variables to kind of compute and give people an exact time frame. It could be anywhere from, the next week to 10 days to could be 6 weeks. No one knows right now.
So I don't know, has there been yet shortages of coils and tanks and so forth?
So we obviously don't own any retail stores. So I don't, at the retail level, I mean, I've, anecdotally heard that, yeah, people are having trouble finding what they need. I can tell you that as a distributor, we definitely cannot fill the demand of what people are asking for in, coil areas, certain products. So yeah, there's definitely issues in the supply chain. How far it's kind of gone down to the retail level, I don't know 100%, at a national level right now.
But the effect is there, certainly, from COVID-19. And, just thank God the CDC is spending its time on this issue as opposed to the epidemic of teen vaping.
Yeah. And, it's crazy when you think about it that this even came to a vote in the House with a potential pandemic going around. Just put that into perspective. This is what they're concentrating on right now, for political reasons, instead of, this potential disease that could spread across the United States. I mean, or even, to me, in my opinion, more important things like making sure that everyone's life in the United States could be better by the work that our policymakers do. Not by restricting their choice, but by making sure we have good laws and working on, essentially what we put them in office to accomplish.
Well, that's all we can hope for. John, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Just hang tight right there, and I'll just do a close. And that is it for this edition of RegWatch. Before you head off, please go on over to support.regulatorwatch.com, support.regulatorwatch.com, and consider making a financial contribution to our vaping coverage. It's easy. Just dig into your wallet and find a few dollars and then toss them our way. You'll be happy you did it, and so will we. And while online, don't forget to like us on Facebook, and please follow us on Twitter. For regulatorwatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.